Today I'll talk about building a strategic plan for adopting Fluid UI, or what you have to consider and plan for if you're implementing some Fluid UI content. In this session I'll go over several things. The first is to give you a thorough understanding of Fluid UI, not from a technical side but from the business side, so you can see what Fluid UI is and what the benefits are that it provides applications. Second, I'll dig into the details of a strategic plan. So if you decide to roll out Fluid UI content, what are some of the things that you have to consider from the business side and from the tactical or implementation side as well? And finally, I'll talk about some additional considerations or other items that you may want to think about when moving to Fluid UI. And then I'll show you where to go for additional resources on Fluid UI and Selective Adoption. Let's start by talking about what exactly Fluid UI is. You may have read about Fluid UI or seen it in a demo or in a video feature overview. And you probably saw Fluid UI running on a mobile device and thought, oh, I know what Fluid is. It's PeopleSoft's mobile. While that is true, that's only a small part of what Fluid UI actually is. To really understand what Fluid is, you must start by stepping back and thinking about the user interface for enterprise applications and where the UI for classic PeopleSoft is right now. Existing PeopleSoft applications, for the most part, are menu-driven and optimized for back-end power users. The applications focus on finding instances and entering data, not providing a simple user interface for novice users to accomplish tasks. Even some of the latest enhancements that PeopleSoft has added, like work centers, are focused on making power users more productive by minimizing the number of mouse clicks. The fact is, the classic PeopleSoft user interface with components and menu-driven pixel-perfect pages does not provide a rich user interface that can produce an easy-to-use intuitive application for the non-power user community. That includes executives, managers, and employees. So in the past, rolling out business applications to this community has been difficult and typically requires a lot of customization. If you think in more broad terms, and you say the objective of a new improved user interface from PeopleSoft is to simplify the applications to the point where they can be rolled out to novice users, then you have to ask yourself, well, what does that need to do? Well, let's go over what it needs to do. First, it needs to offer a new navigation paradigm, one that presents information to the user and allows them to navigate directly from the data they see, rather than always having to return to a menu. Fluid UI does this by leveraging the new secure enterprise search and offering related actions from every search result, list, and page the user sees. Second is a simplified user interface. Simplified means breaking down large components with many different tabs and complex entry into simple pages that are easy to read and fill out and will guide the user through steps based upon data they enter or questions that they answer. This type of UI is essential for the casual user that does not spend most of their day working on applications. Fluid UI does this by giving application developers the tools they need to build simple, data and query-driven user interfaces. The third thing you need to do is to provide relevant, important information to the users that they can use to help them do their job, whether it's making decisions or navigating the system. Fluid does this through the use of real-time analytics that can be viewed, drilled into, and even adjusted and modeled by the end users. And finally, the last requirement for a new user interface is to be available anytime, anywhere, on any device. Power users sit at their desks and use desktops. Casual users are sometimes at their desks behind their desktops, sometimes in meetings with a tablet, and other times they may be commuting on a train with a smartphone. In all these scenarios, access to the applications is critical. Fluid accomplishes this with a responsive and adaptive UI that changes based on the screen size of the device the user is using to access the system. It's those four features that make up what Fluid UI is all about. With Fluid, PeopleSoft has changed the user interface significantly. The user interface is now information-driven, self-service oriented, targeted to the novice or casual user, and extended to any device, whether it's a smartphone, tablet, or desktop computer. Now that you know what Fluid UI is and the reasons that PeopleSoft built it, let's talk about what it takes to implement Fluid in your environment. To do that, let's talk about what a strategic plan would include. And I'll break this into two parts. First, we'll look at the business side of the plan, or what's necessary from the business analyst. And after that, I'll talk about the tactical part of the plan, which includes the implementation and rollout. The first step in the strategic plan is to look for places in your organization that can benefit from what Fluid provides. The best candidates are processes that benefit by having employees, managers, and executive use the applications themselves. These benefits that Fluid provides, the new navigation paradigm with real-time analytics, the simplified user interface, and the cross-device support so applications are available anytime, anywhere, are all features that make pushing the application out to the novice user much easier to do than in the past. With that said, what are some of the applications that will make employees, managers more productive? Well, let's look at a couple. Expense management. Now, this is an application that lets the user enter data right where the activity occurs. If the employee sits down for a meal or takes a cab, they can create an expense line on the spot using any device they have, rather than waiting several days until after the activity took place. When they finally do submit the expense report, all the data has already been entered where it actually took place. Approval management. Approvals are made by decision makers, and they tend to be people that are busy, not behind their desktop computer all day. Access to these decision makers at any time and any place is essential for efficiently running a business. The best and the most efficient way to engage these decision makers with approvals is through the use of mobile devices. Using mobile technology, approvals can be made at any time in any place. Time entry. Again, this is an example of real-time entry at the point that it happens. Capturing the data is immediate as opposed to batching. It's possible to have instant access to the data to help managers manage their staff. Project management is an application that uses pivot grids for real-time analytics. Projects can be very complex, and having real-time up-to-the-minute analytics to help those that are managing the projects can be beneficial. Employee self-service. Here's an application that pushes the maintenance of personnel data and puts it in the hands of the end users as opposed to a power user. The simplified user interface from Fluid UI makes it possible for any user to manage their own data. So these are just a few of the new applications that are being delivered using Fluid UI. There are many other examples of application content that leverage the new features in Fluid that can benefit end users. It may be that your organization has some other demands or custom application components that could use Fluid technology to move the application into the hands of users that are in the most need. But this is the type of analysis that's important upfront in your project. See and understand the benefits of Fluid and determine if it's something that your organization can benefit from. There's a lot of information and resources that business analysts can use to keep up with PeopleSoft Fluid UI product direction. To understand the scope of what PeopleSoft has delivered, there's the Cumulative Feature Overview tool that identifies all the new features by update image. You'll find a lot of relevant information like minimum People Tools release that's required for the feature and links to resources where you can get more information on the feature. To stay current with what PeopleSoft is working on for future releases, there's a planned enhancements and features homepage on My Oracle Support. Both can be accessed through the PeopleSoft information portal at www.peoplesoftinfo.com. There's plenty of additional information in the information portal that's useful for your planning, like video feature overviews and PeopleSoft Talks. All of this information can help the business analyst understand what types of Fluid applications are being delivered by PeopleSoft and how they take advantage of what Fluid UI offers. Once you've decided on the Fluid content, the next thing to do is to put together a plan to get it into your application. This is the tactical part of the plan for implementing Fluid UI. For it, I'll cover 3 parts. First, the operations, and this is how the content is implemented in the PeopleSoft applications and what you have to do to the application. Second is mobile. This is new. This is distributing applications to mobile devices and allowing access to enterprise data from these mobile devices. What do you have to consider and what do you have to do? And finally, the last thing is about the end users. Some of these users will be getting these applications for the first time. How do you get them to start using them? Let's start with the operations side. You can think of this as what has to happen to your PeopleSoft application as part of the strategic plan to roll out Fluid. I'll go over these 5 different areas, the sum of which will help you prepare for the PeopleSoft applications for Fluid. They are leveraging and taking advantage of Selective Adoption. Now, Selective Adoption is the name given to the lifecycle management application process that you'll use to select and add Fluid UI content to PeopleSoft applications. Next is what you need to know about customizing Fluid UI content, considerations that you should make if you're going to convert a custom component to Fluid UI. The Fluid UI is not the only mobile technology that PeopleSoft has used and delivered. I'll cover the different technologies that PeopleSoft has used and talk to you about how they work with Fluid and with the Fluid UI. And finally, I'll give some thoughts about using Fluid UI with older applications that are prior to 9.2. Selective adoption is PeopleSoft's lifecycle process that's used to deliver both maintenance and new features to PeopleSoft customers. All changes are delivered in a PeopleSoft Update image, and using PeopleSoft Update Manager, you choose only the changes you want to apply. It gives you the flexibility to take only what you want and do it on your own schedule. Selective adoption has changed the maintenance process, and PeopleSoft has published a recommended set of best practices to get the most out of selective adoption. Since all Fluid UI content is delivered using selective adoption, your strategic implementation plan should recognize that. You could say the two go hand in hand. So the first part of your plan is to become familiar with and start using selective adoption best practices. I won't cover that in this session, but I'll refer you to 2 other Spotlight Series sessions, Implementing Selective Adoption and Selective Adoption Best Practices. Use these as guidelines for starting your work with selective adoption. Just as with classic PeopleSoft, customizing pages is a very real part of implementing Fluid apps. In many ways, customizations for Fluid are similar to classic PeopleSoft. After all, Fluid UI is PeopleSoft technology. So all Fluid apps are built with PeopleTools and use the same PeopleTools objects, components, PeopleCode, records, pages, and so on that are used by classic. PeopleTools developers will be very familiar with that part. But there are significant differences between Classic and Fluid PeopleSoft. The biggest difference is how the pages are defined. In Fluid, all of the user interface controls are positioned by relative layout instructions rather than the pixel-perfect layout used in Classic. Relative layout means that every item that shows up on a page positions itself relative to something else, either the side of the page, the top of the page, a container, on the page, or another control. It's this relativity that makes Fluid UI pages dynamic and capable of changing the look based upon the size of the display being used. What this means to the developer making customizations is that they need to be aware of how to modify and define new instructions that will cause the page to present the desired layout. For these types of pages, it's typically been the web developers, but now it's the responsibility for your PeopleSoft developers. There are a number of resources available to help your developers become familiar with PeopleSoft's Fluid page layouts. PeopleSoft delivers a Fluid User Interface Developer's Guide in PeopleBooks, and there's a CSS guide for PeopleSoft Fluid User Interface. I'll mention those and additional resources and where to find them in the Additional Resources section later in this session. Your project might include converting some of your custom components to Fluid UI. If it does, there are some things that you should be aware of. It's very rare and unlikely to have a classic component convert directly to Fluid without any changes, or with only the changes being to the page. Classic components are designed for power users, not novice users, and they were built without the new features available with Fluid. Power user interfaces tend to be very large, complicated pages that often have many tabs and typically require some training to be able to use. They are not the types of user interfaces that can be distributed to the masses without a lot of difficulty. Fluid has the added benefit of simplifying the user interface, using new simplified navigation paradigm, access to real-time analytics, and being able to run on many different devices. Add to that the fact that non-power users will be using the applications, and you see how the design requirements have changed. All of this should be taken into account when designing a Fluid component. It may be easier to just convert components in place, but they might not meet the functional needs and they won't take full advantage of what's available with Fluid UI. PeopleSoft has delivered applications that run on mobile devices using several different technologies. Fluid UI is recently available with PeopleTools 8.5.4, so all mobile applications that were delivered prior to 8.5.4 used a different technology. There are 2 different technologies that you should be aware of: iScripts and PeopleSoft Mobile Application Platform, or what we commonly refer to as MAP. Both of these technologies, as well as Fluid UI, are built by PeopleSoft for use explicitly in PeopleSoft applications. So I'm not talking about external mobile development tools. iScripts are technology from PeopleSoft that let developers create servlets that are implemented in PeopleCode. That's really another way of saying that you can use a URL to execute a PeopleCode program and have the results returned to a web browser. The mobile applications implemented in iScripts are nothing more than people code programs that use component interfaces for data access and update and return HTML that's been formatted with open source libraries like jQuery Mobile for a nice look and feel on mobile devices. That's a pretty complicated way of saying they're just hard-coded in people code. These applications look good and work well and can coexist nicely with Fluid UI applications. In fact, the expense application implementation available at the time of this recording is one of the iScript applications. Another technology that's used is called Mobile Application Platform, or MAP. MAP is a technology that's built and delivered by PeopleSoft to create HTML-based responsive user interfaces that use RESTful services to access and update data. That means that there are user interfaces that go through the PeopleSoft integration gateway instead of using the PIA architecture. They're a direct alternative to Fluid and can be used for simple, lightweight, fast pages when Fluid UI doesn't meet the requirements. Since MAP is built with RESTful services, it's nice for implementations that work across PeopleSoft pillars or integrate with third-party applications. At the time of this recording, mobile approvals are delivered using MAP technology. Again, both of these technologies work well with Fluid and can be used interchangeably with Fluid UI technology. Both can run as tiles on a Fluid homepage, and since both are built with PeopleSoft technology, both take advantage of the same security model that Fluid and Classic PeopleSoft use. All of the Fluid UI application content from PeopleSoft will be delivered on 9.2 application, but that doesn't mean that pre-9.2 applications can't take advantage of Fluid UI. If you're running an application version that's compatible with PeopleTools 8.5.4, then you can create and run Fluid content yourself. The process would be to first upgrade your application to PeopleTools 8.5.4. When that's done, you'll have all the tools necessary to create your own Fluid UI content. You can create new Fluid components that take advantage of the simplified user interface, as well as a new navigation paradigm and real-time analytics. Of course, all the content must be built by you. To help with your project, I'd recommend using 9.2 Fluid content that PeopleSoft has delivered as a design prototype as much as possible. If you follow the same UI guidelines and implementation style that PeopleSoft did with 9.2, it will go a long way to help you with the look and feel of your applications and make your implementation easier. You can find examples in the PeopleSoft update images downloaded from my Oracle support. I think it goes without saying that it will also make it easier to upgrade to 9.2 when the time comes. Of course, we would recommend upgrading to 9.2 and using the Fluid UI that's delivered instead. That would give you the benefit of using the delivered Fluid content plus the ability to use Selective Adoption for your ongoing maintenance and adoption of new features. If that's not possible, custom Fluid can be built on any application running PeopleTools 8.5.4. There are a few things that you have to consider as part of your strategic plan when rolling out Fluid applications that will run on mobile devices. Where are the devices coming from? How will the applications access secure corporate data? What happens when a device is compromised, like being lost or belongs to an employee that leaves? And how are you going to get Fluid applications onto the device for the user to use? All of these are good questions, and they are being dealt with by virtually every organization that rolls out mobile content in different ways. One of the most common solutions is to use mobile device management software to control enterprise applications used on the devices supplied by employees. These products control what applications can be loaded by corporations and how secure data is accessed. They can also secure devices and manage situations like lost devices and when employees leave. Oracle provides this technology in a product called Oracle Mobile Security Suite. You can find out more information about OMSS on the Oracle Technology Network. For PeopleSoft applications to take advantage of mobile device management technology, they can either run in a secure browser as an HTML application, or they can run in a mobile wrapper that's distributed to the mobile device. While the app is still HTML-based, it's distributed and accessed as though it's a native application. PeopleSoft delivers the Mobile Application Framework Foundation, or MAF Foundation, to do this. MAF Foundation lets you package your PeopleSoft Fluid applications with a native mobile wrapper and distribute them in either public mobile stores like Apple's App Store or Google Play, or more commonly in enterprise app stores. Users can select and download the application and install it on their mobile device, and it looks like and behaves as though it's a native application, not an HTML app. Consider both device management software and the Mobile Application Framework Foundation when planning your rollout to mobile devices. The final step in creating the strategic plan is figuring out how the application will be rolled out to the end users. Remember, this involves access to the application on mobile devices such as tablets and smartphones, and may also involve access on desktop computers. On desktop computers, the minimum browser requirements are different for Fluid UI than they are for classic PeopleSoft. For Fluid UI, the browser must support HTML5 CSS3 technology, so the minimum browsers are Chrome 35, Firefox 25, and Internet Explorer 11. Fluid applications are designed so that the end users can use them with little or no training, but that doesn't mean there won't be issues. You should plan simple rollout instructions, such as video training to show users where the applications are and how they could be used, as well as having proper support and feedback process. It's the novice user that will be using these Fluid applications, and quick turnaround for simple problems will help with the success. Now I'll talk about some additional considerations you may have when putting together a plan for Fluid adoption. Some other things that you may want to consider when preparing a strategic plan for Fluid UI. The first is the overall load on the system. If you're thinking about implementing Fluid UI application, chances are you'll be rolling the application out to a large user population rather than a small controlled set of power users. If that is the case, you should consider the additional demand the user community can have on the performance of your applications. One of the things that Fluid UI does very well is analytics, but analytics are based on queries, and depending on the efficiency of the query, that can lead to problems with performance. Testing of system performance under expected peak loads is something that you should plan to do. You may find performance on mobile devices is slower than expected. Mobile devices that use data services are not as fast as connected systems. If the mobile components that you design use a lot of data for things like searching and prompting, you may find that they become difficult for your users to use under certain circumstances. One more thing to consider is test automation. Regression testing takes up a significant percentage of any project, and Fluid UI implementations are no different. If you don't automate regression testing, consider taking time to start a pilot project as part of the Fluid UI rollout. This will be beneficial in the long run, especially using Selective Adoption as the lifecycle management process. So in summary, the first takeaway I hope you have is that Fluid UI is much more than just a new mobile user interface. Fluid UI is the next generation user interface for PeopleSoft applications that work across technology, from smartphones to tablets to desktops, and lets applications do the types of things that are necessary to advance the UI to a broader set of users, providing more information through real-time analytics and makes the application easier to use and navigate. Look into your organization to see how Fluid UI can be of benefit, whether it's by making the application easier to use and extending it to more novice users, or giving more insight into what's happening in your organization through real-time analytics, or putting applications that are in the hands of users anywhere, anytime. When it comes time to putting the plan in place, remember that this project will cover broad areas. It starts with the business analyst, and it covers operation, mobile, and end-user rollout. Make sure all aspects are accounted for in your strategic plan. There are many additional resources that you can use to help with your Fluid UI project. I'll go over the resources that are available and where to find them for Fluid UI as well as Selective Adoption. There are some additional resources to help you understand and work with Fluid UI. The first is a good white paper that describes how to convert a classic component to a Fluid component. It's on My Oracle Support, document 1984833.1. It does a very good job of describing the basics of a Fluid page and what it must have in order to support dynamic layouts. The second is essential for anyone developing with Fluid UI. It's the CSS Style Guide for PeopleSoft Fluid User Interface. It's also found on My Oracle Support, document number 9955.1. It is essential because it documents the CSS3, this Cascading Style Sheets version 3 styles that PeopleSoft uses for page layouts. You'll want to become familiar with these and use them for your customizations and custom pages as much as possible. The best place to go for general help is the Fluid User Interface Developer's Guide. It can be found online in PeopleBooks. I get to it by starting at the PeopleSoft Information Portal, www.peoplesoftinfo.com, selecting People Tools, choosing the Documentation tab, selecting the hosted PeopleBooks link, again choosing People Tools, then selecting People Tools Release 854 Online Help. Select the Product Families tab and choose PeopleSoft People Tools 854 link, and when you expand the Development Tools section, you will see a link called Fluid User Interface Developer's Guide. If you don't see it, make sure you have the Products tab selected properly. Again, it's important to point out that to start a Fluid UI project, you'll not only have to become familiar with the Fluid UI technology, but you must also be in position to get the most out of Selective Adoption, the lifecycle process from PeopleSoft. There's a white paper available on my Oracle support that describes the value of Selective Adoption. The PeopleBooks documentation for the Selective Adoption utilities is found in the People Tools 854 Online Help under Change Assistant and Update Manager. You can find it in the same place the Fluid User Interface Developer's Guide is found, but it's in the Lifecycle Management Tools section. And make sure you visit the PeopleSoft Update Manager or PUM homepage on a regular basis. This is the central location for all things related to PeopleSoft Update Manager and PeopleSoft Update Images. Here you can find information about Selective Adoption, update image homepages, troubleshooting links, best practices, and more. There are a number of courses available from Oracle University. The PeopleSoft Fluid User Interface course will teach you the basic concepts and give you hands-on experience developing with the new Fluid UI. You'll use App Designer to create pages that use CSS3 to dynamically lay out pages and controls that are responsive based on the screen size they're used on. With that background, you can use the Fluid UI Developer's Guide, the Converting Classic Components to Fluid Red paper, and the Fluid Style Guide as resources to help you with your customizations. In addition to Fluid, there are a number of courses available for lifecycle management. In-depth understanding of the new lifecycle management process will be helpful. The PeopleSoft Lifecycle Management Release 853 training teaches you how to use App Designer's upgrade features, Data Mover, application data sets, and Change Assistant to manage customizations, apply application updates, and upgrade a PeopleSoft application. PeopleSoft Update Manager training teaches you how to use PeopleSoft Update Manager for your 9.2 applications and the PUM-enabled 9.1 Interaction Hub. You'll learn how to perform each task from installing Oracle's VirtualBox to applying updates to your PeopleSoft environments, as well as upgrading PeopleTools and applying PeopleTools patches. The Lifecycle Management and PeopleSoft Update Manager Accelerated Release 854 combines the 6 days of training from the Lifecycle Management course and the PeopleSoft Update Manager course into 5 days.